This episode is brought to you by Batnick. Rare earth metals are the hidden backbone of modern technology and defense, powering everything from smartphones and electric vehicles to fighter jets and wind turbines. Batnick recognized this early, launching the Rare Earth and Strategic Metals ETF, ticker REMX, 15 years ago, well before supply chain security became a global priority. Today, China dominates the production and refining capacity of rare earths, creating real challenges for global supply security, as these materials are essential for technological innovation, clean energy, and national security. That's why countries around the world are racing to build their own supply chains and reduce reliance on China. As this global shift continues, investment in the rare earth ecosystem is growing rapidly, from mining to advanced manufacturing. Investors can access this powerful trend through REMX. Visit vanek.com/REMX compound to learn more. We are joined today by Doug and Heather Boneparth to talk about their new book, Money Together: How to Find Fairness in Your Relationship and Become an Unstoppable Financial Team. Guys, welcome to the show.
Hey.
Michael.
Ben.
Okay.
Ben.
So, I did read the book, and I was so delighted and relieved to very immediately find out that it was written by Heather, through Heather's perspective, which was a very wise decision. It's enough of Doug. It's enough.
Yeah. No, I'm good. I'm good here, guys. By the way, I'm barely literate, so it's probably bad.
It was not possible.
Yeah. Would not have.
So,
actually.
all right. First question. Who is the book for? Like, when you thought about this idea, who did you picture in your head to be the person that was, I'm talking to them?
Awesome question.
I think this book is for any couple at any age, but I would say that our generation, the millennial generation that's kind of seen some things. We've been through a handful of unprecedented events that have probably caused us to pivot and reevaluate things in our lives a fair number of times in those years where big things are typically happening in our lives, where you're graduating college, starting your adult life in the workforce, having children, doing all those, major financial moves.
Yeah.
And I think that the thing that we wanted to create was a place for people to see a little bit more of themselves in other people's stories. Because I can speak for myself, and I can't tell you the number of times over the last 2 decades that I've been like, is it me? Are we the only ones that are dealing with this? Because I feel like no one's supposed to be able to do this, right?
Yeah.
Like
the level of how dynamic things are at this particular phase, I think that everyone here on this pod is in, like, it's the craziest time. And therefore, it's the easiest time to lose track of communicating with your partner about things that are super important, like money, like the very thing that, greases the wheel of the things that you can do in your life presently and the things you need to invest and save for to get to those big goals in the future.
And at the same time, like, people get lost in their marriages all the time. And a lot of that has to do with money, right? That is not a new concept to our generation. That's something that's been happening forever. But I think what's interesting right now, and at least the way that I felt, was that it was always made to feel like, is it me? Is it him? Is it everything else going on around us? So the thing that I wanted this book to do was to really give people the tools to have those important conversations at home, get to the bottom of the things that might not be working for them or that are working really well, and gain perspective on their own lives.
Yeah, well, it's a very thoughtful book, and it's interesting. We're all middle-aged people, and I just think about how. Yeah, we are. Come on.
We're
middle-aged people.
That way.
We're
seasoned.
She gets so mad when I'm saying we're old now, and just
we're not old, we're just middle-aged.
Michael's
we're
response.
Like, we have one foot in each side. But I think back to how little thought my wife and I put into many of the big decisions we have. When getting married was obviously a thing, but then buying a house and having kids and all these things. It's like you look back and you go, man, I was so naive going into this. Like, I didn't understand so much of this. And to your point, like that, putting it out there, I think can help people, because my wife and I talked about a lot of stuff. Like, man, this thing we're going through, other people have to be going through this too. And we realize it's not an easy choice. Like for us, a big one was, daycare or my wife continuing to work. And like, that was a big decision for us. It was not easy for either of us, but especially for her. And those kind of things, there's no handbook for this. Like they don't teach you this stuff when you have to make these decisions. It's really hard.
No, and I think it's really easy to believe like you do this one time and you think you have it all figured out.
Yeah.
Like if you were to ask us at 30 years old, or I guess 31 was when we bought our house out in the suburbs, and like it was the hugest financial decision ever, and we had a little baby and we were like moving out to the suburbs from the city. We're like, we got this all worked out, right? Like
Yeah, like
it's
it's in the year or two around that. We really did think we had it, noodled out, and we'll just continue to trend this way forever. And that's a lie. That's a lie. As you go through these periods of life, almost any period of life, you're going to have to navigate finances differently. For us, that resulted in Heather's career in law, ultimately, being something that allowed me to grow a business, us to grow a business, because she was there the entire time helping me make decisions while being an amazing mom, while being a full-time attorney in the corporate world. And we found out that that wasn't serving us very well. We found ourselves, struggling to have the conversations that needed to be had, and it was very difficult. And if a financial advisor and a lawyer are struggling in this area, what is everybody else doing? Again, Heather's point, are we alone? And it only underscored just how difficult this can be. It's inherently difficult to have basic money conversations with your partner. I think it's difficult to even understand your own relationship with money before you even get to your partner. The whole first part of the book is about getting to know yourself before you even dive into where your partner came from. And that inspired us to really put this together, is like, hey, people need help here. And it's an area of personal finance that's just so important. As we look at the divorce rates, we look at the number one reason people, have issues in their relationship is around money. It's like 51%. And by the way, it's not solved by how much money you have. Billionaires get divorced at
right.
the same rate ordinary people do. So
Not just a scarcity problem, because money, when we're talking about money, it's not just money. You're talking about your identity, your values, your perception of autonomy and independence from one another, and from the powers that, control us in this world. So I think like it's just so dynamic, and there's never it's not a one-time answer. And so we wrote this book, and we chose to highlight different seasons and chapters of people's lives in these short stories for a reason, because we want you to kind of see that your life moves in seasons, and we know this season, but maybe we don't know the next one. And so embracing that uncertainty and fortifying the relationship and the communication skills between the two of you will help you prepare for whatever comes next.
When do you think is the right time for people to have the money conversation? Is it before they maybe get engaged? Is it on the first date where it's like, hey, I spent $3,000 on crypto, dick butts. Like, wanna have a like? And what was it like for you guys?
Conversation.
yeah, it was definitely exactly our first convo. We predicted crypto dick butts. No. And no, it's not in the DMs before you even ask the person out on a date. Hey, before we go on this date, are you American Express or
What's your
Visa?
credit score? Give it
Yeah.
to me.
Exactly. These are the things that will determine if you have a successful relationship. Not at all. I think it is always a good time to talk about these matters. It's how you talk about them. You don't need to, Ben, good point. Like, what's your credit score? Like, that's obviously not going to fly on your first date, but it comes through the stories. Like, you get to know your partner through the stories that they tell. What was it like growing up in Southern Alabama? You will inherently learn things about what their life at home and financial situation was. Yeah, we didn't grow up with much. I always got secondhand clothing from my brothers and sisters. You just picked up a lot of information about that person's, background when it comes to money. Okay, they didn't grow up with a lot of means, or we had food insecurity. Could be the other way around. Like, yeah, I came from immense privilege, and you know what? That I'm trying to escape that. I'm always under the thumb of my family and my parents. You learned an incredible amount about that person on a first or second interaction without coming off like, "Hey, how much money do you make?"
I did this completely the wrong way. When we got engaged, I think I've told Michael this before. I literally gave my wife a PowerPoint presentation on how we were going to invest our money. And
Wow. Very
because
romantic.
she asked me, she's like, wait a minute, so we're gonna put our money in the stock market? That's really scary. So I said, all right, I'm gonna put some stuff together, I'm gonna show it to you. And I put a PowerPoint presentation, and I think I just beat her down, and she just, all right, fine, you're right, I'm wrong. That was the wrong way to go about it. But yeah, I think to your point, a lot of these things come out more naturally than like sitting down and like, you put your ledger on here and I'll put my ledger and then we'll hash it out.
But what you don't want are surprises, right? You shouldn't be waiting till your honeymoon. I mean, oh my God, we opened the book with this story that like we'll never forget. Doug and I were on our honeymoon in the Italian, like Positano, like where all the other like American tourists go. We're like sitting at the one restaurant that they tell us all to go to, right? And we're sitting next to this other couple on their honeymoon, and we hear them. I'm like, oh my God, they're fighting about money. And
Wild. Then on their honeymoon, you have debt? You have student loan debt? You pay the groceries. I'll handle the car payment. And we were just like, this is the hot mess express happening right now.
The point is that is not the time, but at the same time, you don't need to be like busting out your statements on the first date. We're talking about values, about identity, about your culture, because that all says a lot about the way that you handle money and the way that you'll have to handle money together.
By the way, Ben, you said something very interesting, which was like, hey, I tried to, sit my wife down and talk about investments through a PowerPoint presentation. And I think this is an avenue, not just in practice, but in interviewing couples where I see particularly guys go astray every time. Like I will never forget, like we wanted to set up regular money meetings to discuss a myriad of things that we needed to go over, from the business to our own household finances. And there I would be, sitting with a spreadsheet in front of me, like a print. Like, I went the distance of printing out the spreadsheet. There's a net worth table, a cash flow statement, and I could see, like, think about, like, from Heather's perspective, is she excited to see this in front of me, to go over the thing that I want her to be?
Now I am. You're speaking from the standpoint of, there was a moment in our relationship, and I think this happens to a lot of women, which is why caregiving and contribution is such a big part of the book. I think there is a moment where the division of labor becomes so inequitable in a household, or it can be, where I don't like to gender this and make it women versus men, but where oftentimes a woman will find themselves handling so many of the household responsibilities, if not almost all of them, that money feels like the only thing they can check out of, because it's the only thing they don't mentally feel responsible for. So in a moment like that, when Doug comes marching in and I'm drowning in, by the way, my full-time job as a corporate lawyer, the kids, and helping him out with the business at night, he comes walking over with this.
This is not on the menu, guys.
Don't care. How about I don't care?
But if it's not only not care, but the point I'm trying to make with Ben's particular situation, which resonated really well, and Heather has a very good point as to why, that's not a way to enter it. But if you simply flip this on its head, instead of me maybe sitting down with spreadsheets in front of me, and I talked about something we both mutually want, right? For example, we knew we wanted to go on vacation over, Christmas or the holidays. And I said, hey, can we talk about, this vacation? We're sitting down. We both want this thing. Everyone's motivated. And I know I can then have a nice on-ramp into, okay, let's see how we can make that happen. Yeah, let's cancel this, weekend we thought we were going to do there, because, hey, lo and behold, the spreadsheet is getting involved. The ones and zeros are being discussed. So the approach.
It's the framing. It's the framing of the issue around a positive shared goal that can really pique interest when somebody may have been a little disengaged from their finances for some time.
There was multiple parts in the book, and I'm really annoyed that I left it at home, because I did take notes to ask you guys, but there was multiple parts where I was laughing. I think one of them was, like, as you just described, Heather, was like Doug, something with his socks. And obviously knowing Doug the way that I do, like, it made me laugh, but also, like, of course I saw myself in a lot of the same situations.
That's the goal.
That was when I said that I was ready to, like, leave Doug over a sock on the steps.
That was the straw that broke the camel's back.
It was the sock that broke the camel's back.
Right.
Final tweet.
Right. So what do you, go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, it's really that moment right there highlighted the imbalance and the lack of fairness that clearly started to, build in, our relationship, how we viewed our careers and our time and the roles that we had in our marriage. We clearly weren't going to get divorced, but it prompted a real hard and meaningful conversation between the two of us that ultimately charted what would then take place in our lives, which gets us here today.
Money is the most complicated item to talk about because it's geography, it's where you are in your career, it's the background that you grew up with, like how did your parents talk and think about money and behave with money. So I'm sure there is a not great answer to this, but I'm curious, with that terrible setup being said, is there like something over the course of all of these different interviews that you saw come up sort of regardless of all of these differences, that there was maybe something that you could like nudge or fix? Like, we see this mistake so often, but I don't even know, I don't know if mistake is the right word. I just don't know what else to call it. What are some of like the bad habits that you see couples doing with money?
You're nodding your head, so I want to let
No.
I'll say a money adjacent one first, and then he can give you a more like a
Go for it.
direct money. I don't like to call them mistakes, but to your point, like something that people are getting wrong. Oftentimes when partners are trying to divide labor in their homes, which I believe that money and care and labor are inextricably linked concepts, because we're never going to have like equity out. Sorry, I just poked you.
I think he just picked my nose.
We're never going to have
That's
equity.
love. That's love.
Love.
Right. We're never going to have equity out in the world unless we have it at home. And something that I see often and that I heard often and that we experience often would be Doug saying something like, tell me what to do and I'll do it. And that
I
works,
do that.
Uh-oh.
and that works two ways. Like, even when it comes to money, and if he wanted to engage me on something, I would say, well, just tell me the one thing I need to know so that I'll know it. And this idea that the other person doesn't need to own what that is what's wrong about it. So I've just used labor as an example, but like, it doesn't help me for him to drive somebody to one place once if he didn't put it on the calendar, he didn't prepare them to go there, he didn't arrange the carpool, and him just showing up to like drive her there is not
We all have our
helpful.
tails between our legs right now.
But what's helpful
Yeah.
is to conceptualize, plan, and execute, which is a concept from Eve Rodsky and her framework of fair play. But this idea of conceptualizing, planning, and executing, owning it, right?
Yep.
Owning something. So when it comes to money, even like one person can own the task of like paying a bill, but like you still really need to know a lot more about your finances. You
Yeah.
can't just like say, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Like, you both have an individual responsibility to step into your understanding of money and be sure that you know what it's going to.
It's a practice. It's a practice. You don't go to the gym one time and you're in the best shape of your life. If you go to the gym 4 days a week for 6 months, you are in the best shape of your life, arguably. And it only gets better and better. And yes, owning tasks through and through was something that we saw come up a lot. I'll tell you something we saw that came up quite a bit. It was partners not meeting the other person where they're at. And this really was with how they like to learn or how they process information. I am a financial professional. I do things a certain way with my clients. And, you would think I would know that not everyone learns the same, and I do. And therefore, it's up to me, if I'm the one with that kind of knowledge, to find out the ways in which this is going to resonate with Heather. And I'll give you a quick example that we saw. We had one couple, really, as another financial professional.
Oh, yeah, talk about the neurodivergent. Yeah.
Yeah, beating his head against the wall, tried everything under the sun, rearranged the numbers on the spreadsheet a million different ways. And then finally realized that his wife was a visual learner.
She also has ADHD.
There was neurodivergency. We all have things, right? And guess what? They brought out a whiteboard and he started drawing things out in a more visual way than just being limited to the cells of an Excel spreadsheet. And it clicked. So I see people really being stubborn in their own ways, or thinking about, I'm going to work with my partner in the way that I would do this, instead of thinking, again, you flip it on its head. How does Heather, or how does my partner learn best? I will make that. It's not even so much a compromise, but I will shift my thinking or my approach. And lo and behold, you start connecting and getting the job done. And you have someone who is like, hey, I'm never going to get it. Oh, I'm starting to get it. And then you get into the practice and you build on that.
So I have one couples thing that I feel very strongly about, and we've gotten questions on this in the past from young people who are about to get married, and it's should we combine our finances or not?
Oh, yeah.
And I think 99% of the time when you don't combine your finances, it works out poorly. I think it just
I would
invites
agree. Yeah.
fights. I've heard people say, "Hey, we do it and it's fine," but it's like, you're paying this share and I'm paying this share. I
Yeah.
think combining your finances is something you almost have to do. I don't. There's very few outliers that can make that work without combining your finances.
There have been studies that show, and that some of the professors have worked on those studies. We interviewed for our book that in the first several years of marriage, the outcomes are better for couples who combine their finances because it increases accountability, transparency, communication. It creates a dynamic of a team dynamic versus one where you're kind of saying like, we're going to keep score, or we create like a bean counting mentality of you do this and you do that. And you want to create a communal environment in your relationship, and not one where you're, keeping score too much or hiding the ball.
The practicality of the split finances breaks down pretty quickly when, we did talk to a couple who ultimately it all came to a head. It's a whole chapter called the croissant. The woman lost it over her now husband eating a second croissant while they were on vacation in Tokyo, and it had nothing to do with the croissant. They agreed that they should split everything 50-50. So whether it's over, a husband wanting that extra appetizer, or what are you gonna do? Like split, the stuff for the kids down the middle? Like to what end does these types of does living in the financial silos, continue to work?
And by the way, this does not mean that you should not keep individual accounts. This means that you should operate your family and household finances together as a team.
Yeah.
But there certainly are valid reasons why people keep their finances separate, which I always like to point out, like, sometimes in second marriages, sometimes when one partner has been a victim of domestic violence in the past, there's reason why people decide to keep their finances separate. But by and large, it is better and the outcomes are better when you combine finances. And also something that's really interesting is you start to see that communality with your finances and partnership and teamwork, that then can bleed into other areas of your life when you start reciprocating around other things, like how you divide up the household labor. When it becomes less of a keeping score, it becomes more of a team. And I got you. Don't worry about that extra croissant. I'm happy to get that.
I'll put a bow on it. It even teaches the kids, I think, more valuable lessons around teamwork and sharing. So, they're always, if you have kids and they're young, they're watching, they're listening. And just like you received your scripts from your upbringing and your background and all of that, they're doing it too. That's exactly what's happening. So it's multi-generational and dimensional when you're taking these kinds of actions.
Where have you seen the best cadence of money talks happen? I happen to think that a quarterly review is a bit odd, but it's odd for my personality, but obviously it works for some very disciplined type of thinkers. Is it like, hey, we're okay, but we need to talk about the big things like a vacation, college planning, summer camp, and we'll talk about it as they come up. And again, I'm sure it's personality driven, but what have you seen that you can share with the listeners?
Yeah. So for us, and just like you mentioned, we do this on a quarterly. Our practice is a quarterly check-in, and we call them money dates. Heather already mentioned time and place are absolutely critical. Maybe do things you like to do together. We like to walk. We like cocktails. We like to eat. We'll center it around that.
That's what makes it less weird and more organic, is the fact that we choose to do this at a time and a place that it's actually something we enjoy to do, and that we probably would have done anyway.
Yeah.
We just happen to make the focus of that around money and our big picture goals.
But as far as like the content itself of these discussions, it does range. And I think it's best to start big picture high. I think it makes sense to start with, don't start your meetings with what's wrong. Start with what's right. What win did you have? What's serving you well? That's going to lend itself into a much more productive conversation when you ultimately do get into being critical around what needs improvement. So, time and place, how you begin, the style, these are all very relevant. And there's
do this all the time.
No, we don't.
That's the thing is like, you don't want to be doing this every week and kind of
That's so that
forcing the issue.
But you're going to have those conversations, the little bits and pieces, whether it's, a large purchase that needed to take place in that given day or that week. You don't need your quarterly check-in to talk about, the daily decisions that are of course in your life. You want to talk about, are we getting to our goals? We want to talk about, do we need to change any kind of savings or investment plan? You want to talk about, if you own a business, we have to get to the P&L. We have to actually have a whole part of this conversation that's, well, how's the family business doing? Because it's intrinsically linked to what we're going to do in terms of our spending, saving, and investment. So it's really a forum to go there. I would obviously say have structure around that, and an agenda might be helpful, but the hot tips are time and place and starting with the positives, not the negatives.
And wouldn't you also say that doing this quarterly, which again, like may be right for you, may not be, but it is for us, it allows for us to really embrace and look at the seasonality of our spending and our decision making too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. In practice too, like you tell clients to give themselves, you put them on a savings plan or some kind of investment plan, and they get frustrated in 1 month because they didn't execute. That's silly. Give yourself some grace and some time to actually be able to see consistency and discipline pay off. So at a minimum, you'll see results in 3. I would prefer to look over the course of a year. And if you're doing quarterly, guys, like that's 4 cracks at it. And I know I'm just going to end up adding by 4 here. After 2 years, it's 8, 12, and 16. We can all count by 4, but in our profession, we talk about compounding all the time. If you want compounding effects, which will come from creating a practice and discipline around these conversations, you do need to give yourself some time. But the most important thing is to build consistency and discipline.
Wait, I have a follow-up question, but hold on. So on this topic of you guys meet quarterly, but a lot of people listening might have a financial advisor where they do something similar with their partner. Does this supplement or replace that? Or is this like, how do you think about that?
I love that question.
What a great question, Michael. That's a great question. I think this has to supplement your work with an advisor. And I think, in fact, it can improve your relationship with your
I think the advisor makes this work easier.
Yes, having the advisor makes the work easier, but it doesn't replace it, because as part of these money dates, you have to be discussing time. You have to be discussing how you both feel. Do you feel overloaded? Are you feeling content with the way you're spending your time? Where do you think you need to reinvest your time? Do you feel like your partner's doing enough? Those things are outside the scope of your typical quarterly meeting with your financial advisor. But when you have those discussions with your partner in advance, you can then tailor the meeting with your advisor.
You make a great financial advisor.
Thanks.
But the reality here is that the advisors are giving the framework. They're doing the network. They're building out the ones and zeros and all of that stuff that you then can run with and get into these more intimate, deeper conversations, like Heather said, that you're not going to have across from me at the table. And Michael, it's a great question, because that's exactly what I say to them is like, there's so many things I don't need to worry about from clients that do comprehensive financial planning and come sit down with me on a quarterly basis. I know like we got 80% of it covered, but that 80-20 rule is the 20%, that's where the magic is. That's where the goo of the relationship is, if you're the goo.
Did you guys find any good rules of thumb from talking to couples about, say, like spending for big purchases? I feel like my wife and I's relationship has evolved over the years with that, where just checking in with like, what's our amount if we're going to spend? Like, do you guys have that?
We are big believers in the check-in number, and that anything beneath the check-in number within reason, unless you notice patterns that are really having a negative impact on your financial lives, like anything below that needs to be fair game. Like, I don't believe in, oh my God, I hate the term allowance. That is a term for children, not for your spouse. So I do believe there has to be enough financial autonomy for you each to be able to act on the things that you want for yourself, but also on the things you need to keep your household operating. Like, there's nothing I hate more than like a trope of like, my wife, she spends so much, when like most of the stuff she's spending money on is for your children and for your household to run and operate. So I think like we have to have a check-in number. The number has to make sense to the two of you and meet your comfort levels. But beneath that, you should be able to act with autonomy.
But it's funny. I just ordered a new laptop, guys, and I knew, they're not cheap. And I know Heather, specifically as someone who loves technology and is an early adopter of anything they can get their hands on. I know, despite it being, a couple $1,000s, I didn't necessarily need to check in for that specific thing. It's for business, it's tech, that's who I am. It's part hobby as much as it is practicality. But I actually looked at her and I said, "Hey, you know what? Just want you to know I'm getting a new laptop." And she's like, "Yeah, great." So, it
But that's because we all know that there's one area in life that Doug will always jump on to
sure.
spend.
But I still felt the need to stick to the rule that was, hey, this is a large purchase. What I didn't want to happen was like, the situation was like, oh, I see you got a new laptop. Yeah, I trust you with technology, but like I've been wanting X for so long, and you just went out there and dropped, a couple $1,000s. And yes, it's okay, but like now we're having like a weird moment around, this that never needed to take place at all. I want that time. I want that kind of time back. I want that energy and I want that time back in my life. I don't want to spend it, doing that. So Ben, you nailed it. The check-in number is a really practical thing to like implement in your relationship.
Listen, I also believe in equality. I spend more money on clothes and shoes than my wife. So I like to reverse the rules here. She gives me crap about it all the time.
I think that's great.
We've
and I like your shirt today.
Thank you.
All right, guys, last question from me. There are a lot of finfluencers out there. Some are giving wonderful advice and others are giving really crappy advice. Is there anything that you see that just absolutely drives you nuts?
Yeah. One size.
Gotta let you take.
There. First of all, but shout out to all the finfluencers that are like really putting out amazing content and grinding it out. I think it's not easy to do. I think that life is tough. I really do. And as someone who creates content, like I know how hard it is. And then you have a whole slew of experts or folks who are trying to put on way too many one size fits all strategies when it comes to helping you navigate your financial life. And it typically shows up into here's the real estate course, or I'm going to point to some ticker symbols that are literally the most common index funds under the planet, or is just imbuing their advice with the most survivorship bias you could ever like. This is what worked for me, so it's definitely going to work for you. And I'm just like, it's
so clear these folks do not have the context of ever working with real clients or real couples over a prolonged period of time to help them through real issues in their lives, real major moments in their lives. Yeah. It's so clear when they lack that context.
They're great for skilling up and getting a base of knowledge. And I absolutely love that. It's never been more democratized, the fact that podcasts like this exist where people can come and get educated and be trained is an absolutely wonderful thing. But in a sea of a lot of content, you have to be very mindful, particularly around content where people are making real decisions that impact their real lives. This isn't like to pick up like, oh, Ben's shirt's awesome, I'm going to go pick up that. That decision's not going to bankrupt you. But going out and buying a couple Airbnb properties thinking, you're going to take advantage of cost segregation and bonus depreciation, and you've never dealt with a tenant and you don't even know what a mortgage is. Like, this is terrible advice in that context. Right? Like,
because it has no context. That's the point.
That's the survivorship. I did it. You can too. Here's my course for $100 a month. The only thing that happens here is you're out $1,200 at the end of the year.
Well, Doug and Heather are married happily, talking about money, and you can be too if you read their book, Money Together. Doug and Heather, you guys are the best. Look forward to seeing you at your book party.
Thanks.